speaking out about that moments ago, calling it a big lie.
I read a report today about CIA. That's totally a false story. That's another lie. They put out propaganda. They put out lies. Let's see what happens with Iran. We are ready for the absolute worst, and we're ready for sense, too.
Plus, brand new information as Iran holds the crew of a British tanker captive, parading the terrified hostages for all the world to see. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin tops the hour for us. She's live at the Pentagon. What else has Iran done today, Jen?
Well, Julie, Iran's state-run news agency even went so far as to post on Twitter photos of Americans they said were the CIA handlers of the 17 Iranians they say they arrested today, accused of working with the CIA. Those photos included pictures of the Americans with their families. We have chosen
where they shut down the American UAV. They've now lied in the last few days about where they took down this tanker. It's part of the nature of the Ayatollah to lie.
Julie.
All right, Jennifer Griffin, thank you so much. For more on this, let's bring in Michael Singh, Managing Director at the Washington Institute and a former Senior Director at the National Security Council. Always great to see you, Michael. I first want to start a couple things. The claims that Iran arrested 17 CIA spies, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, as you just heard, dismissed Iran's announcement saying on Fox that the Iranian regime has a long history of lying. We all know that. The president then tweeting this: the report of Iran capturing CIA spies is zero truth. We don't have it, but I'll read it. Just more lies and propaganda, like their shot down drone put out by a religious regime that is badly failing and has no idea what to do. Their economy is dead and will get much worse. Iran is a total mess. I also want to add a news agency in Iran is saying that some of the so-called spies have been even sentenced to death. What reason would Iran have to lie about this?
Well, Julie, Secretary Pompeo was absolutely right. Iran has a history of lying. And to put this in some context, just about anyone the Iranian regime arrests is usually labeled either a spy or a terrorist. It's something that's common to authoritarian regimes, Julie, and it frankly comes out of this desire to basically smear anyone who's engaged in any activity you don't like, even innocent activities like journalism, for example, as somehow under the direction of a foreign power, as somehow a threat to the nation.
I mean, has there been any confirmation at all that anyone has gone missing? When you hear CIA, spies being arrested and sentenced to death, clearly, there's got to be somebody out there that can confirm or deny that.
Well, obviously, the president quite emphatically denied it. Usually the U.S. intelligence community doesn't comment on such things.
Right, the CIA has not commented.
Right, and I think, though, we can take the president's denial at face value.
Right.
I think this is probably just, again, an attempt by the Iranian regime to smear these unfortunate people and sort of connect them to some external power when, in fact, they're probably not at all.
The video we're watching on the left side of the screen, this dramatic video that came out, and I'm going to turn now to the UK tanker that was seized on Friday by Iran's Revolutionary Guard. You can see them wearing these black masks, and then they're fast roping down on that helicopter. This dramatic video, released, and then there's audio that also came out of the moments leading up to the capture. Listen to this.
You are ordered change your course to 360. 360 degrees immediately. If you obey, you will be safe. Over.
That as you are conducting transit passage in a recognized international strait, under international law, your passage must not be impaired, impeded, obstructed or hampered. Please confirm that you are not intending to violate international law by unlawfully attempting to board the MV Senator.
I mean, 360 degrees. They wanted them to turn around and head back, which they had every reason and every right to be there lawfully. Iran continues to muddy up the waters, quite literally, in the Strait of Hormuz. The rogue regime, it's acting more like a toddler, not getting its way and getting in the way of oil tankers who under international law have the legal right to pass. What is the next step here?
Well, this was indeed an act of piracy, I think, as Secretary Pompeo said, and as well as the British Foreign Secretary said. But it's also an act of retaliation. The Iranians were quite clearly trying to parallel what the British had done to their tanker. But of course, the two situations aren't at all comparable. The British were enforcing their European sanctions on the transport of oil to Syria when they took the Iranian tanker. The Iranians had no justification for their action. And I think what makes it even more outrageous, though, Julie, is the fact that they did it with the Royal Navy right there. And while we hear those radio transmissions, we don't hear things like warning shots, for example. And so the British have announced they're going to try to beef up their maritime patrols, but one wonders really, Julie, if that's going to be sufficient, given that there was a Royal Navy vessel there and it couldn't do anything.
Yeah, I just, before I let you go, a British warship had prevented a seizure last week, but this time that British warship apparently just wasn't there close enough in order to prevent this. So the question now is, will European allies now get in line and protect these shipping lanes once and for all?
Well, hopefully they will, Julie. Hopefully they'll beef up their presence. Hopefully they'll take another look at their rules of engagement, which I think is also necessary.
Right.
But I think, Julie, it's also going to take American leadership. I don't think we can just say, well, this is a European problem. If we want them to really sort of stand tough against the Iranian regime, we're going to need to help stiffen their spines.
All right. Michael Singh, thank you very much. Great to see you, as always.
Thank you, Julie.
A double murder mystery after a couple taking an extended road trip is found dead. What investigators have learned so far. Plus, why Robert Mueller's upcoming testimony could make or break it for the Democrats.
We had a total no collusion finding. The Democrats were devastated by it. They went crazy. They've gone off a total no collusion finding.
But Mueller's testimony will be high stakes for both parties. Here is House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler.
Well, the report presents very substantial evidence that the president is guilty of high crimes and misdemeanors, and we have to present or let Mueller present those facts to the American people and then see where we go from there, because the administration must be held accountable and no president can be above the law.
Joining me now, Elena Trini, Axios White House reporter. All right, first I want your take on Congressman Jerry Nadler's comments right there on Fox News Sunday.
So Congressman Nadler, obviously he heads the Judiciary Committee, and those would be the ones who would bring forth potential impeachment proceedings against the president. And I think that's what a lot of Democrats in the House are looking at this at. They hope that Robert Mueller will say something on Wednesday that will only stoke more support from impeachment. And I interviewed more than a dozen members of Congress and staffers on these committees, and they said, at least on the Democratic side, that they really look at this as an educational opportunity. They don't think that most Americans read all 400 pages, and they want Robert Mueller to highlight the most damaging aspects of that report.
When you bring up impeachment, it just reminds me of the president's, comments that he made earlier here live on Fox when we were playing back that tape. But he was talking about how that backfired badly. I mean, last week, the Democrats actually tried to move on an impeachment vote, and Democrats themselves voted against it. So clearly, the impeachment vote, since that Mueller report, or some 400 plus pages of it were released, have not necessarily led to impeachment. So how is then Wednesday's hearing with Robert Mueller going to change things at all?
Well, so I think there's a difference with what happened last week. So Congressman Green, he's brought forth and tried to get an impeachment vote on the floor before last week. But what happened that time was a lot of members, Democratic members, were saying this is not the time to do it and this isn't the issue. He was trying to use the president's racist tweets to bring forth an impeachment battle. And essentially that did backfire. But I think a lot of people still believe that this investigation, even though it's been wrapped up by Robert Mueller, there could still be things that come to light that show they might get more of the American public on board. And a lot of members have said that. They said, Jackie Spear, a congresswoman from California, she's on the Intelligence Committee. She said, my fantasy is to use my 5 minutes to just have him, frankly, read passages from the report that she finds to be damaging.
She told you that on her Axios report. We can put it up on the screen and show our viewers exactly, how excited she is to question Mueller. She says that my fantasy is when I get my 5 minutes, I'm just going to have him read certain excerpts from his report, and I think that will be very powerful. Democrats are hell-bent at this point on asking pointed questions about the report, bringing up specific sentences and whether certain details inside and between the words point to obstruction of justice, since they know they don't have collusion. The president says no collusion, no obstruction. Those are his two, main themes here. Are Republicans at all worried, though?
Republicans aren't, from my conversations with them, aren't that worried. They have a different agenda, frankly. Whereas Democrats want to educate the public on the report, Republicans are really going to be grilling him on the origins. How did this start? Why did it take so long? And then also, what a lot of members told me is that their biggest priority to find out when Robert Mueller established that he could not prove that there was any collusion and why he didn't bring that conclusion out earlier. And so that's what I think a lot of Republicans will be looking for.
Right.
So we'll be different. It will be interesting to see the opposing agendas from both sides.
Now, speaking of both sides, House Republicans, they vowed to, throw out and lobby tough questions of Mueller at Wednesday's hearing as well, which will be a first, right? Now, here's Republican Congressman Doug Collins, a top Republican on the House Judiciary Committee, on just that. Watch.
We've got some great guys on our side and gals that are going to ask some really pointed questions to make sure that the American people understand this is not a vacuum that the Democrats have completely to say the president was doing something wrong. We're going to also go back to that corrupt cabal and others, I think, as you look at it in general, that need to be part of this picture. Remember, the Mueller report is a one-sided report that has not been questioned from the other side. This is our chance to do that.
So what will Republicans try to prove or disprove?
So, a lot of members are trying to look at, similar to what the president's narrative has been on this, is kind of undermine the credibility of the Justice Department and the investigation as a whole. President Trump and several members of Congress have said, called this a witch hunt, essentially. And so that's what I think a lot of Republicans will be trying to prove or make Mueller answer to. Other questions, Lisa Page, Peter Strzok, FBI agents that a lot of people believed were biased, and their text messages showed that they did have some disdain for President Trump. They will be brought into this. Other questions will be who authored the report. Some members say that Andrew Weissman, he was a top prosecutor on Mueller's team, but he also had some connections to Hillary Clinton. He went to an election night party for her back in 2016. They're wondering whether he had a big role in that report. So they are really trying to get, again, to the credibility of it and the integrity of the investigation.
All right, Elena Treen, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Massive protests in Puerto Rico with thousands in the streets demanding the governor's resignation. Also, Costa Rica issuing a national alert after 19 people died from tainted alcohol. Plus, new developments on a double murder case with hundreds of thousands of protesters demanding the resignation of Governor Ricardo Rossello. The uprising triggered from allegations of corruption and years of scandal. Brian Yanis joins us now from San Juan. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Julie. Well, today was a historic day. Hundreds of thousands of Puerto Ricans taking to the streets today. The 10th straight day of protests. People asking for Ricky to renuncia. That is the name of this movement. Ricky renuncia. Ricky resign after Governor Rossello is dealing with allegations of corruption as well as mismanagement of millions of dollars in his cabinet. All of this really starting, and you can look at this video of today. It was just incredible. These people were blocking the major highway going into San Juan. Again, this could end up being the largest demonstration in Puerto Rican history. This all really started when 800 pages of text messages were leaked, and people started seeing these messages in which Rossello was speaking with 11 of his top aides, and they were making misogynistic, homophobic comments. They were making fun and mocking Hurricane Maria victims, and people just said they had enough. And just moments ago, President Trump at the White House started commenting, made a comment about the governor, Rossello, for the first time. Take a listen.
You have incompetent, totally grossly incompetent leadership at the top of Puerto Rico. The leadership is corrupt and incompetent.
We spoke to people here on the street, and they said this is exactly why we need Rossello to resign right now, because obviously he is not a good representation if the president of the United States thinks that your governor is corrupt and somebody that he can no longer work with. Rossello yesterday spoke on Facebook Live, and he said, I will not seek re-election next year. I will resign as president of my party, but he chose not to resign. And that really added fuel to the fire and made people angry before today's movement. Take a listen.
I think the most upsetting thing is his attitude, that he could get away with everything, with anything, and that he could do whatever the hell he wants, and basically trying to make fools out of Puerto Ricans, and we just had enough.
Ricky Martin, Residente, Bad Bunny, they were all here today. Big Puerto Rican singers. They were on their flatbeds on top of this highway, shutting things down. People here tell us if he does not resign now, things are only going to get worse and maybe even, hopefully not, resort to violence. 99% of these protests have been peaceful. Julie?
All right, Brian Yanis, thank you very much, reporting live from San Juan, Puerto Rico. Well, health officials in Costa Rica issuing a national alert after at least 19 people died from apparently drinking tainted alcohol. They say it was mixed with toxic levels of a chemical used in antifreeze. and have confiscated 30,000 bottles of liquor. Laura Engel is following this story for us from our New York City newsroom. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Julie. Well, this all started in early June, and unlike the situation in the Dominican Republic, where mostly tourists died after consuming alcohol at hotels, health officials in Costa Rica say these deaths range in location and age groups, with the one common denominator being those who died all appeared to have drunk booze that had toxic levels of methanol. Now, the Costa Rican Ministry of Health has confirmed the 19th suspected methanol poisoning deaths happened between June and July. 14 men and 5 women between the ages of 32 and 72 died in 5 different locations throughout the Central America Republic. Now, while it is still not known how the deadly levels of methanol got into the bottles of liquor consumed by these victims, the government has confiscated, as you mentioned, about 30,000 bottles of alcohol suspected to be poisoned with brands including Guaro Montaro and Guaro Gran Apache. Now, as the national alert was issued, the Ministry of Health warned those who live in and are visiting Costa Rica against consuming alcohol from these specific brands, and say vendors who sell drinks from these labels could face criminal sanctions. And the World Health Organization says methanol poisoning outbreaks are often tied to counterfeit or informally produced drinks. And medical experts say if you do have a drink with methanol, you may not even realize it right away.
So the problem with methanol is that it's so much more dangerous than alcohol. It can make you blind, it can damage your kidneys, and you might not even realize this at first, and then you can die. Even 30 milliliters, which is 2/3 of a shot glass, that's enough to cause permanent blindness.
It isn't the first time a methanol poisoning outbreak has occurred. There have been recent outbreaks in about a dozen countries, Julie. The investigation continues.
Wow. All right, Laura Engel, thank you very much. Thanks. So new polls showing Bernie Sanders losing support among New Hampshire voters. Why the Vermont senator can no longer take the granite state for granted. Plus, police in Canada desperately searching for clues in the brutal murder of a North Carolina woman and her boyfriend as they investigate other mysterious deaths close to where the couple was found.
I'm going to a place in my mind I haven't been before. Yeah. I have not, in my mind, I haven't thought about what's going to happen when I see the face of the person that did this.
So what's going on with Sanders? I mean, today, with a little more than 6 months to go until the 2020 New Hampshire primary, Sanders has gone from being the unquestioned frontrunner to second place and sliding.
Well, and not even second in some polls. It's been a struggle for Sanders, and his struggle is a lack of self-awareness. He didn't understand what happened in 2016. What happened in 2016 was, for a lot of very liberal voters, but also for a lot of people who were just put off by the Clintons' cronyism and the legacy problems and all of that corruption jazz, people who were put off by all that said, you know what, I'm going to cast a protest vote for Bernie Sanders. I'm going to go over here. So that gave him what ended up being 46% of the vote in the Democratic Party. He thought those were his voters. What they really were, as it turns out, or most of them really were just voters not available to Hillary Clinton. Elizabeth Warren is making an increasingly effective pitch for those voters. She is obviously very plan-oriented. She has a policy for everything, but also she's got something else. She makes an argument that she is more electable than Bernie Sanders, who, as a Democratic socialist and as an older white male, isn't exactly in touch with the spirit of the Democratic Party these days.
A University of New Hampshire survey center, a CNN poll, out last week found Sanders dropping 11 points among likely Democratic primary voters, and that's just since April. Biden right now still takes the lead with Warren and Sanders, Buttigieg in the New Hampshire Democratic primary. But it's interesting how Warren has sort of made him seem outdated. Maybe Sanders should start drinking beer with people.
I don't know if that will do it. And he probably enjoys a cold one. I don't know. But look, there's no way that the two of them, they're not both coming out of New Hampshire. They both represent neighboring states in the United States Senate. Both are well known. Both have a claim to New Hampshire. There's no way that Bernie Sanders could lose New Hampshire or come in behind Elizabeth Warren and make an argument to go forward. The real challenge for them, though, is as long as they're dividing the far left vote in the Democratic Party, it becomes harder for them to take on Joe Biden, who, despite some slippage, maintains a strong status as the frontrunner.
Yeah, until that next debate. You never know. Kamala Harris could quickly catch up to him. Sanders' former campaign strategist talked to the Boston Globe. Here's a portion of that interview. New Hampshire is not just Bernie's to lose anymore. No, it is not even a contest between just Bernie and Biden, because both are slipping. It is a contest now between 4 or 5 of them. Does Bernie have to win in New Hampshire? Well, here's the thing. All of them do. Good point.
Well, I will take with grains of salt people who were former campaign advisors. There may be there may be some sour grapes there. And I also tend to disagree with this. I don't think that Joe Biden has to win in New Hampshire, nor do I think that Kamala Harris has to win in New Hampshire. Because remember, the beginning of the Democratic nominating process is ideologically extreme, old and white. Iowa and New Hampshire is, for both Republicans and Democrats, outliers compared to the rest of the party, the rest of the primaries. As soon as you get to South Carolina and then Nevada and then Super Tuesday thereafter, things look very different. If Biden or Harris look credible coming out of Iowa and New Hampshire, then go down and win in South Carolina, they can run the table from there and have no problem.
And then New Hampshire won't be holding as much weight. All right, I got to move on to another topic before I let you go. Amidst the Me Too movement, of course, many resignations, both political and in the professional business private world. But one politician is regretting his. The New Yorker's Jane Meyer writes, Senator Al Franken cried as he discussed his resignation. And here's part of that. He said, and she is saying this, when I asked if he truly regretted his decision to resign, he said, oh, yeah, absolutely. He wishes that he had appeared before a Senate Ethics Committee hearing as he had requested, allowing him to marshal facts that countered the narrative aired in the press. Now, Chris, it's extremely rare for a senator to resign under pressure, but it's done. The question is, would he have survived had he not resigned?
What all of that forgets, what all of this forgets, is this was about an Alabama special Senate election. The resignation of the senator from Minnesota was about a special election in Alabama in which Republicans had nominated a guy who had been accused of improper attitudes and treatment of teenage girls when he was a prosecutor, Roy Moore. And this was about sticking it to the Republicans, and this was about claiming the high ground at the moment when the Me Too moral panic was at its apogee. This was the pinnacle moment for all of that. And Al Franken was collateral damage. I'm sure he regrets having resigned, but we can't pretend like the moment wasn't the moment.
Yeah. All right. Chris Darwalt, thank you very much.
You bet.
Regrets, I've had a few. All right. I always like that song. Chris Darwalt, thank you.
You bet.
Well, time for Campaign Trail Mix, a fundraising battle, a warning about the economy, and payroll reports topping today's edition. Peter Ducey is live in Washington. Hey, Peter, what you got for us?
Julie, money doesn't win elections, but it helps. And last month, the Republican National Committee brought in more than twice as much as the Democratic National Committee, more than $20 million to the RNC and less than $9 million to the DNC, according to a count done by Politico. Some of the Democrats with the highest profiles right now have sworn off trying to woo wealthy donors, including Elizabeth Warren, who has a new warning about an economic doomsday within the next year. She writes this: when I look at the economy today, I see a lot to worry about again. I see a manufacturing sector in recession. I see a precarious economy that is built on debt, both household debt and corporate debt, and that is vulnerable to shocks. And I see a number of serious shocks on the horizon that could cause our economy's shaky foundation to crumble. Warren's primary rival, Mayor Pete, has had some shakiness of his own and had to spend some time off the trail lately managing unrest in South Bend after a police-involved shooting of a black man. And now police sources are telling Fox they are so unsatisfied with Mayor Pete's handling of the investigation that, quote, that's the big discussion, is who's staying and who's going. I think you're going to see a mass exodus. Our administration is a joke. Mayor Pete was the fundraising leader of the second quarter, so cash not a concern for his campaign. But other contenders are using accounting tricks to make it seem like they've got more money in the bank than they do, waiting until the reporting period ends to pay staffers all at once, according to a review by the Daily Beast. Amy Klobuchar, Michael Bennett, and Jay Inslee are among those whose records reveal that they might have used these tricks to, again, make it look like they are more popular with donors, paying tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars the first day of a period so that they can pay people, but it just looks like they had more money in the first place. Julie?
Okay, that explains it. All right, Peter Ducey, thank you very much. A double murder north of the border, baffling investigators. An American woman and her Australian boyfriend were found dead on the side of a highway in British Columbia last week. The couple were on an extended road trip through Canada and may have experienced car trouble. Jonathan Siri has more on this bizarre investigation. Jonathan?
Julie, one of those victims, Lucas Fowler, is the son of a police inspector in Australia. In fact, the New South Wales Police Force has sent 2 of its detectives to Canada to serve as liaisons. Australian authorities say it appears Fowler and his American girlfriend, China Deese of North Carolina, were fatally shot while traveling in a remote part of northern British Columbia. The young woman's family want answers.
And I want this to be personal. This was someone's son, someone's daughter.
This isn't enough. This is not enough. And there's a huge safety concern for people traveling in Canada in or around that area this summer and right now, and it's concerning.
But Canadian authorities say homicides in this part of British Columbia are highly unusual, and they're downplaying rumors that the couple may have fallen victim to a serial killer.
At this point, we have nothing to indicate that their deaths are linked to any other active and ongoing investigations in that area of the province, or that there's a heightened risk to public safety because of this.
A week ago today, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police found the young victims' bodies in a blue minivan along British Columbia Highway 97. It's also known as the Alaska Highway. This crime scene is located about 12 miles south of Liard Hot Springs. The RCMP has posted electronic billboards in that area, urging the public to provide any dash cam video that they may have recorded in the area on July 14 or 15. And obviously, the RCMP would also like to speak with anyone who may have had any contact with that couple during that time frame. Julie?
All right. Jonathan Siri, thank you so much. Escalating tensions in the war of words between the Squad and President Trump.
Yeah, I'm not going nowhere. Not until I impeach this president.
From a group of House Democrats known as the Squad.
When the one mentioned that brown people should speak for brown people and Muslim people should speak for Muslim people, and you hear all this, it's not what our country is all about. No, I think they're very bad for our country. I think they're very bad for the Democrat Party. I think you see that, and they're pulling the Democrats way left.
Joining me now, Juan Williams, Fox News political analyst and co-host of The Five, and Joseph Pinion, secretary of the New York Young Republicans and chair of the Conservative Color Coalition. Thank you both for talking to us. All right. So the president tweeted that he doesn't believe that these 4 congresswomen will ever be capable of loving our country. What do you think of his remarks?
I think he's on the defensive. I think he had a very troubled week on the issue of race. And he's now trying to make them out to be the ones who have a problem. As I just read, tweeting that they're a racist group of troublemakers. I mean, that's a guy who's really, I think, revealing his own anxieties at the moment of people calling him racist. So I think that's what that's about. They're incapable of loving America. These people not only took the time to run for office, they were elected to office and swore an oath of allegiance to our great country.
He's referring to that tweet where the president said, and, calls them troublemakers, but he also calls them young, inexperienced, and not very smart. The Squad, some of them have made some anti-American, un-American comments, which they would understand. This president is obviously not going to lie back and let those comments go unnoticed.
Yeah, I mean, I think just realistically, we're talking about politics. I mean, I think unfortunately, Democrats have literally taken the race argument and obliterated it, beaten it into the dirt. And so I think, when you're talking about swing voters, I don't think that's going to be an effective vehicle right now. Mm-hmm. I think if you're talking about what the president is talking about, he's talking about the fact that, maybe I can't look into your soul, but I do know that all love is not healthy love. Some love can be toxic. So when you can sit here and find compassion for Al-Qaeda, but you can't find compassion and nothing but contempt for the men and women who are on our border, that sounds like toxic love. When you have, Congresswoman Presley talking about the fact that, hey, guess what? There's only one way to be a black voice. There's only one way to be a Muslim voice. There's only one way to be a queer voice. Well, maybe you have love for those communities, but it also sounds like like toxic love. So I think those are the issues that, really are coming to the forefront. Americans are going to see what they're going to see on the issue of race. I think that's long been decided. But from a political purpose, I don't think it's a coincidence right now that the president's approval numbers are on the ascent.
I mean, what's toxic is racism in this country. And, the Congress women and men and the president all need to come together and try to fight that. I mean, racism is what will bring this country down. And we are built on a country full of immigrants and full of black and white and Asian and many different colors. And that is part of America. And that's why a lot of people legally immigrated to this country. What is the next step here? Because this cannot continue. I mean, the send her back chants he later denounced. Many people argue that he didn't really mind the chants at the time. But I believe the president is trying to dial back his rhetoric. But is he doing enough?
Well, not if he's tweeting this morning that they're a racist group of troublemakers. I don't think that's dialing back. I think that's a guy who's becoming more defiant and angry in response to the criticism that he's receiving. Even when he did sort of step back and say, well, I didn't like that chant, I don't think that's good, because many Republicans had come to him, apparently even his daughter, to say
Melania Trump as well, in fact, came to him and asked him to sort of try to dial it down.
And this reiterates what you were just saying, Julie, that this is not good for the country. This is not good for one people out of many. And to see him